Welcome back to the Takeout. As you may well have noticed, limiting data centers, or at least increasing conversation about where they're going to be placed and under what conditions, has become increasingly a bipartisan issue. There's a new House bill that would prohibit the federal government from getting involved into local data center debates. Michigan Republican Congressman Tom Barrett introduced that, and he joins me now. Congressman, we'll get to that in a second. You have my word. But I just want to ask you about the intensifying trade war between the United States and Canada. Support, neutral, or opposed?
Well, I think that for here in Michigan, we have a pretty special relationship with Canada. Canada is our largest trading partner in Michigan. We have a lot of products that go back and forth over the border a multitude of different times, vehicles that are built here or assembled in Canada, vice versa, and across the board with different manufacturing, especially that is really the lifeblood of Michigan. For me, I want to make sure that we have certainty in our markets, that we have certainty in our trade relationships, and that we have an arrangement that benefits both the United States and our trading partners in Canada. I'm still hopeful that we can get to that point, and I think that there's work underway to get there. I felt we were very close to that just a few days ago, and I'm hoping that we can kind of put this back on the right track. I'll be going back to Washington on Monday, and that's something that is going to be definitely a high topic of conversation about how do we get this thing back on the right track to make sure that we can protect American interests, protect our industries here in the United States, protect market access for our folks selling in Canada. There's a lot of issues with agriculture, especially in the dairy industry and other things, making sure that we're doing that in the appropriate way and providing certainty on both sides of that so that you know what to expect in that trade relationship.
Congressman, I don't know if you heard my colleague Nancy Cordes describe a conversation the president had this afternoon by phone with Jim Sciutto of CNN, in which he confirmed that he injected last-minute requests into these negotiations, and that led the Canadians, in all probability, to step back away from that. How does that land with you? Are you good with that?
Well, I certainly wasn't party to those conversations, so I can't say with certainty whether that did or didn't happen. But I think any type of negotiation that's taking place has to be done with candor on both sides.
On this program a couple of weeks ago, I talked to Erin Brockovich, who is very deeply involved in the data center issue, and she said these non-disclosure agreements are terrible for the entire conversation, whether you support them or do not support data centers. They're a cloak of secrecy. And as I understand it, that's something your legislation is about.
You're exactly right. And I fully agree that non-disclosure agreements with public officials is a huge issue that we have to confront. Sometimes I remind people that the only non-disclosure agreement I signed was my security clearance when I was a soldier in the United States Army. And that's something that as a public official, when I was in state government or now having the privilege of serving in Congress, I think we have to protect the public interest. And one of the things I've heard out of concern about data centers, regardless of what people think about the siting and zoning and challenges and local issues about that, is these non-disclosure agreements that are being signed in regards to data center siting. And I believe that we ought to do everything we can to stop that and block that from happening. I can't block in state law something from the federal government, but I can prohibit federal officials and members of Congress from signing non-disclosure agreements through federal policy. And that's one of the things that my bill would do, would be prohibiting members of Congress from signing non-disclosure agreements around the issue of data centers.
Let me ask you about federal environmental reviews. You supported something called the SPEED Act, which would lighten them in this space for data centers. The president also has signed an executive order that would exclude data centers from environmental review, and the administration's made it clear it wants to put data centers on public land. How does that fit with what you're talking about?
Well, I certainly support robust oversight of anything, whether it's a data center or anything else. The SPEED Act was really designed for a whole host of different industries. This wasn't like something conceived about data centers. This was about development and innovation in a whole bunch of different ways. I'll give you an example. I serve on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and we're looking at certainly upgrading and rebuilding infrastructure across our country. I toured a local road commission who was telling me they wanted to simply replace a 60-year-old culvert that was failing, that was just managing a small stream passing underneath a road. And to get that done and reviewed was going to be a tremendous environmental oversight burden just to replace something that was already in the ground to begin with, not changing anything. So really doing permitting reform is something that is incredibly important for the build out of America and what we're trying to do to innovate and build things again. This was not done in any specific way around data centers or anything like that. But I do believe that at the end of the day, these decisions around data centers have to be left and protected with the local community. That's why the bill I introduced that would prohibit the federal
Yep.
government from any federal agency overriding or encroaching upon that decision of local control, and would prohibit federal funds from federal agencies to be used to also attack any effort of local control around the siting and zoning of data centers.
Michigan Republican Congressman Tom Barrett, I appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.